And good morning and welcome to the FS Ag Roundtable. We are at the Patent Block Building, the historic Patent Block Building in downtown Monmouth, again for our second of two Ag Roundtables for this fall as we get ready for harvest season. Our partners include Growmark FF, Midwest Bank, Big River Resources, Elliott Brothers Seed Company, Monmouth College, OSF Holy Family Healthcare, the Warren Henderson Farm Bureau, Compeer Financial, Hertz Ag Management, and A. Eugene Miller Agency. We've got a great discussion lined up, and a special guest who came over to see us from RFD Radio is Mr. DeLoss Yankee. Welcome, DeLoss.
Thank you very much. Always glad to be here. Always appreciate the invitation, and just salute radio stations like yours that, A, focus on local, and if you're going to be intentional about being local here, you have to be focused on agriculture. And certainly appreciate the attention and the support that you give agriculture and certainly all the area farmers. So always glad to partner with you.
Right back at you, DeLoss. And you guys are serving nearly, how many affiliates now? I know we've been an affiliate for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, it's around 80, low 80s. Yeah, there's about 60 stations that carry RFD Illinois every weekday morning. I had someone yesterday tell me that she knows when she hears me on the radio, she knows how she's doing on her way to work. Like when she hears me, she's either like, "Oh, I'm running late," or she's on time or she's ahead. You know, people use that as an interesting benchmark.
Well, it's a good benchmark. Thanks for being here, DeLoss. Okay, also with us this morning is Brendan Marshall with SS. Brendan, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Vanessa. I've been looking forward to this, and it was a great conversation yesterday, and I'm sure today will be just as good.
Okay, thank you so much. To my right is Chris Gavin with Midwest Bank. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Vanessa.
Did you have a nice breakfast?
Great, yeah. Breakfast was good. I think the whole program was awesome. So another successful and a great tradition. It's a great tradition. Look forward to it every year.
Okay, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Ron Moore with us, past president of the American Soybean Association, local farmer. Welcome back.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. I enjoy coming to these roundtables all the time, and we learn more here than we think we know everything. But when you come to these, you learn something new every time.
We're going to learn a lot today. We've got a great group of topics to talk about. Appreciate you being here, Ron. Elliott with us as well, Elliott Brothers Seed Company. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity, Vanessa, to kind of participate, be part of this. I would say you had a good breakfast this morning. Great job by your speakers, and certainly the legislative folks did a nice job as well. So certainly good for the community, and really glad to know that DeLoss has value beyond just being a pretty face and smiling voice. So, yeah.
Thank you very, very much, Rob. Also with us, David Zimmerman with Big River Resources. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Vanessa. Great to be here again. Really looking forward to the discussion today. I see some familiar faces around the table. We definitely don't have any shortage of topics. A lot going on in the ag world right now, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. There is a lot to talk about. Our legislators are here as well, and I heard the most interesting use of a term that I had only known in baseball. It was called PO, pitcher only, right? Well, they were talking about politician only, and it made me think of how great and lucky we are. No matter who's been elected, Mike, you're new with us in this district, and Neil Anderson in our district. It's just so nice. You guys always come to the breakfast. You always, when you get a chance, come and talk to our young people, come to the roundtables. You're not just politicians only. You're all about agriculture and about your constituents. So I'll start with Senator Neil Anderson. Thank you for being here and not being a politician only.
Thanks, Vanessa. No, this is always great to come to. Really learn a lot, and our job as legislators is to listen, and we can't be experts on every topic. And when it comes to the largest economic driver in our state, which is agriculture and ag business, listening to the people that are involved in it day in and day out really gives us not only a good perspective, but it gives us things that we can take back to Springfield when we are negotiating on policy that's going to affect all of us.
Okay, thank you. Senator Mike Halpin, welcome.
Thanks so much. Glad to be back for another roundtable. And I'd have to say that attending these type of things should be expected of the elected officials. and I will look forward to the day when it's not a surprise that room full of constituents, see an elected official there. I don't know that it happens all around the state, but I'm glad to see that my colleagues here in Western Illinois understand the importance. So looking forward to going through these topics with everyone, and ready and willing to step in and help however we can.
Okay. Representative Dan Swanson, welcome back.
Thank you, Vanessa, and what a great breakfast has already been highlighted. And boy, the city of Monmouth looks great this weekend, having been in the parade Thursday night. The turnout for the parade, going over to the carnival, the turnout at the carnival. It's just great to see rural America, small town USA coming together and having a great weekend and honoring agriculture the way that we do during this bee festival. So thank you, and glad to be here.
And Representative Noreen Hammond, welcome.
Good morning, Vanessa. Great to be here. Thank you again for the invitation. I can't believe we're here almost at harvest time. I don't know where summer went, but when you look out on the fields, of course, we can see that time is getting closer. And I know folks like Jake are getting very anxious, and hopefully we're going to have a robust harvest season. But I can't tell you enough how important these opportunities are for us, because it's a great learning experience for us, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. And also with us, Thad Tharp. He is with the Illinois Beef Association and Tri-County Cattlemen. Welcome, Thad.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm either the thorn between the roses or the roses between the thorns, surrounded by all the politicians here. But yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion.
Okay. And also with us, Jake Armstrong, president with the Warren Henderson Farm Bureau. Thank you for partnering with us as well today.
No problem. As Ron said, I always come away from these things more intelligence. I'm just here to learn and here to add a little bit if I can.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Delof, you want to take us through topic number 1 with our crop prospects and expectations, sir?
Yeah, I was going to say, who do we talk to first? Well, as a sponsor, we should talk to our FS agronomist, Brendan. What do you see so far, and have there been any combines? Yeah.
So there's been a little silage chopped, and it's coming out pretty good from what I've talked to 2 growers that have done it. They haven't done any yield checks, but there's a significant amount of corn. Yesterday afternoon, I was able to go on a little crop tour. Started here in Monmouth, went as far south as Adair, Illinois, and we went east Ipava, and then came up just south of Knoxville, looking at various corn plots in different fields. Monmouth's in a very good area right now. I mean, compared to the other 3 we were at, they probably had a little significant less rainfall to the south. Corn's turning pretty rapidly down in that area, and soybeans. You get over east towards the Ipava area, same way as there. And then up by Knoxville is a little better. The crop is good. It's not great, but it's good. I mean, I think that by all aspects right now, I would say average. But what I do highly encourage anybody is to go out and start squeezing some stalks, pushing against them. There's a lot of anthracnose, a lot of crown rot coming in the corn, and some sudden death in the beans. But I would get out and check.
So that might determine where we go.
Might want to start a little earlier. And I think harvest, when it gets started, it's going to go fast. And just in my opinion, things are starting to dry. Yeah.
Were there yield estimates by chance?
We do not do yield estimates.
I've heard so many folks, even in Champaign County, in one of those garden spot areas, that they said that just walking a row is remarkably inconsistent, where you're like, that's a good ear, and then 2 down, you're like, boy, that's not a good ear at all. Rob,
I fully agree. Brendan talked about kind of location variance, but to your point, I think you'll see variance within a field, and certainly each of us from one field to another. When it rained, you'd get 2/10 one place and 1 inch and 2/10 somewhere else 10 miles down the road. So I think probably as well the dryness early kind of slowed us down just a hair and kind of delayed that maturation process. So I think they'll get going before terribly long, but a lot of things probably won't start in earnest till October.
Yeah. Ron, do you have south here similar situation?
Yeah, we feel the same way that Brendan does. We've got a farm south of Roseville. It doesn't look as good as the farm we have north of Roseville. My expectations are going to be just a touch. Yields are going to be just a touch below our average production history. It's going to be a good crop, but it's not going to be one we're going to brag about in 10 years.
Representative Swanson, you have similar north of here?
Yeah, so one of the things, I'm sure it's not just a regional thing, but we had beans sitting in the ground since the end of May to the first part of June when they were planted and laid in dry dirt until early July. We have a lot of beans in places that are way behind other beans in that same field. And same way with corn. A lot of corn with the heat, which did not tassel as quick as the other corn within a field on side hill. Then we got rain, and all of a sudden that corn's tasseling. So I think not only are we going to see a different size of the beard, we're going to see a lot of difference in moisture, I believe, going through field 2 between what has matured a lot later, whether it's corn or the beans. So another challenge for all of us, but see how it goes.
We had country in studio at the end of June, and the message was you better make sure you have your acres accounted for in case this crop doesn't turn out. You know, we were felt close to a widespread failure, and then it rained a couple of days at the end of June, and things were better. I mean, was it that dire up here, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, we were a week away from things looking really, really, tough. And then we get rain. And then there were some areas to get 2-3 inches of rain and 1 or 4. But then 2 weeks later, you're back in the same spot because we were just so far behind. But I think what's probably hurt some of us the most, and maybe on the soybeans, the fact that soybeans can put on a lot of weight in August. And we didn't have a tremendous amount of rain in August. And so beans, I think, are starting to turn a little quicker than they should, or just flat out dying on hillsides and things like that.
Did you have a bunch of rain like early August and then nothing or not much after that?
Rob, you could help me with this one. I would say it was towards the end of July there, right 1st of August, we had a week there when there was a couple 2-3 inches. I was on vacation. That's why I was kind of reaching out for a little help on that one. I just remember looking back on climate, things like that.
Dad, do you have fall crops?
Yeah, I've got some row crops. I'm unique to work with Land O'Lakes Finance. So actually yesterday I was talking with some guys in western Iowa, southern South Dakota, and their insurance adjuster has been out there after chopping silage. And what typically, now this is what I was told, so take it for any farmer at a coffee shop, but typically a 200 bushel area was 120 behind the chopper. So I think I agree with Ron for what little agronomy background I've got. We're going to be okay, but there's a lot of places. And the other part of that conversation was within 20 miles, there was 225 bushel silage. So it's just, it doesn't take very far for it to be really different, but there's going to be some zeros on the report card.
One thing I remember from earlier in the year, I don't know if it affected you necessarily, but we were so cool for so long, like in April, then it got warm, but it really didn't allow that hay crop to grow. Like a lot of people early were like, I'm only getting half my bales or 2/3 my bales, so the hay crop wasn't off to a good start either.
Yeah, hay is short. They release CRP in several counties throughout the state. I know there's a lot of CRP ground that got put up. The feed quality in that is what it is. We're thankful that Big River's over there to give us some gluten and make that stretch, but that's better than a snowball, is what my grandpa always said. That CRP is not much, but it's better than a snowball. So, but for the most part, we are short on hay in this area.
Have you ever heard that before? It's better than a snowball?
Well, my comment is they either eat the hay that I give them or concrete, one or the other. And so they'll eat the hay that I give them. And we baled some CRP ground. But one of the things that, Dad and I raise cattle, but 2 of my pastures the cattle drink out of the creek. And one of them dried up right after we moved the cattle off. And the other one dried up while they were there. And we finally got them moved where we could bring them back home to drink out of well water. So the summer has been a challenge in row crops. It's been a challenge in the livestock producers as well because of the dry weather and the heat.
Did you move the first ones at a normal time, or did that accelerate when you had to
It was a couple weeks before we normally bring them off a pasture. We try to bring them off right before we start going to the field and doing harvest because nobody likes to stop around the combine and chase cattle out of the neighbor's corn.
I remember, Fairview had a huge run. Dale Barnes in Illinois only do a feeder special once a month, summertime. Now they're back to every other week, but they had huge runs in June because people didn't know if they were live the next month's special. These are going to be grass, these are going to be water. So there was a lot moved early. Just not a concern for them. What about our end users then? Like Jake, when you hear these kind of things, what your expectations on how to fill the bin? What does this mean to you?
Yeah, so I'm just at the mercy of what gets brought in. What's unusual for us this year, we typically are about 20% bought ahead, which I would say is low compared to most elevators in Illinois, but we're only 5% bought ahead right now. So it's not just short bushels, short waters. I think people are not happy with pricing. They're just unsure about this market altogether. We had a grower bring in some ears the other day at 27%, and he's notorious for picking at 34. So you're waiting for a phone call that we're getting grain any day now. But it'll be an interesting fall, that's for sure. I agree with all the variability in the room. I'm looking for quality. I'm looking for lighter test weight this year with just the growing year we had. So it'll be a challenge on our end, but it's a challenge I'm happy to take.
Rob, why didn't you sell when it was $6.29 in June? But we didn't know we had a crop in June. So what are you going to put on the book?
Gentleman asked me for marketing advice yesterday, and I said it works every time. Just sell high.
David, what do you think as an end user?
We're actually pretty pleased with what we're seeing now. We're just on the cusp of this thing. We have dumped some new crop corn in our West Burlington facility. Excuse me. We're very happy with all of our draws right now, and it has certainly been just in time weather this year. But our local farmers are going to do it again for us. And if you look back to last year, the difference between this year and last year is that western crop, the western corn belt, was really tough last year. They've got a crop this year. It's not going to be a bin buster, but really, we talk about pricing, and we're $1 lower than we were last fall, and somehow or other, the U.S. farmer, this is still going to be probably the third largest total corn crop harvested. At least we'll see what the USDA gives us next week on the WASDE, but we're going to be close to 15 billion bushels, which would be the third or fourth largest at this point in time. So that's the reason why you're seeing this dollar difference in the price is, from a carryout perspective, we're looking at 2.2 billion bushels for this upcoming crop year versus 1.5 last year. So our supply has grown somewhat. Now, certainly demand has been a big part of that. We've seen our export demand just fizzle. Some of it's been supplanted by the Brazilians, of course, who are having excellent crops down there. But all in all, we're excited about the crop we're going to have locally, whether it's Wisconsin or Northeast Iowa or Southeast Iowa or even Western Illinois. We think we're going to be good.
Yesterday, that was mentioned quite a bit. It was a pretty heavy topic, was the Brazilian and Argentinian corn, because China, that was their choice, it seemed like this year. And it was the first year. Sounded like soybeans. They had done that before. Ron, is that correct? Had been the number one producer?
Yeah. First time I was in Brazil was 1998, and the group I was with, we didn't think they could outproduce the United States in our lifetime. It was 5 short years that they produced more soybeans in Brazil than we did in the United States.
And is part of that because they can do it 3 times a year versus us planting once? Yeah,
you can get at least 2 crops a year. Sometimes some places can get 2.5. But what I learned was that they're not our competitors as much as our colleagues, because if you take out the Brazilian soybean crop, how much is the feed going to be for our hog producers and poultry producers? They'll be cost prohibitive to do that. So we need, now there's an oversupply, it looks like right now, but we need all the grain we can produce in the world because there's places that need it.
Sure.
So I think part of that for South America is adoption of technology and improvement in genetics that we here in this country probably don't really have a good enough appreciation for, honestly. South America is now exceeding the U.S. in corn export, so they're catching up, which makes things like was talked about this morning, the importance of those locks and dams in our infrastructure, for us to be able to compete with folks that we used to have a significant advantage over, but that gap is quickly being made up. So,
Fred Bulow at University of Illinois plant physiologist, for years he's had the 6 secrets to soybean success, and he also had 7 steps. It used to be the 270 bushel corn, now it's 300 bushel corn. I talked to him this summer, and he said that for Farm Progress Show, he said he had folks from Brazil, or like he had South American people calling him regularly, wanting to meet with them when they came to the show. So they're certainly paying attention on how to keep getting bigger.
Sure. Had a bus
with land and with the crops that are on that land.
We actually had a busload of 50 South Americans visit here a couple 3 weeks ago, and that was a 300,000 acre family farm. They were all Japanese who had left as refugee status in the 30s, and their family located in Brazil. And but to your point, they were here. They're looking to learn our secrets, do better.
Okay. Anything else on crop expectations you'd like to cover, DeLon?
It is remarkable. We're going to have a report on Tuesday that's going to give some numbers, and I also wonder if they're going to mess with the acreage numbers at all, and might say even more corn or even more land for soybeans, and that could impact the balance sheet quite a bit. I feel like they're not going down, especially for corn. I don't think it's going down. Whether it goes up, that could make things even tighter.
Okay. Next topic: Inflation Reduction Act on biofuels. This was one, Rob, that you shared with me. We should discuss. Go ahead and take us down that road, please.
Well, the expert sitting to my left on this one, so I won't try to get into his thunder too far. But certainly with this Inflation Reduction Act, there's an opportunity for the biofuel sector to be a winner, and I think they're looking real hard at how they can participate with this whole carbon intensity reduction, and I guess from a farmer perspective, and also a business dealing with farmers, we're trying to figure out how can we help folks be a player to go along with that carbon intensity reduction. So I probably got to defer to David Zimmerman to give us really specific details.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and Rob's in tune with this as well. But the bill was actually, you've heard it called a game changer, and that's true. We've talked this morning about, at the breakfast, we were talking about incentives for farmers to plant cover crops or no-till, and those are voluntary carbon credits that farmers certainly have access to today. But what the Inflation Reduction Act does is it changes the game in that it does incentivize a bioprocessing facility such as ours to actually lower their carbon footprint. So the incentives, and just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, if you take a facility like our Galva facility, it has a CI score of 55 today. Now, we pledged as an industry to get to net zero by 2050. We'll talk about carbon sequestration, I think, ultimately here. But if you look at that 55 score, we can take 30 points off with carbon sequestration. The balance of it, realistically, is probably going to come from our feedstocks. When you do a life cycle analysis of a bioprocessing facility, everything from soup to nuts is counted, and that includes feedstock. Now, we don't have that official guidance from the Treasury yet, but we do hope that it's going to be granular and that it goes all the way down to the farm level, and it can give a farmer incentive, obviously through this act and through the tax reductions and tax incentives that the bioprocessing facility can receive, and we can distribute that out into the farm community. The last 15 to 20 points really need to come from our CI score, and that's where we see the farmer getting involved.
Okay. Ron, can you handle the soybean side for us, please?
Yeah, I think you heard a lot of conversation about renewable diesel which can be soybean oil as a feedstock. Regular biodiesel, to become renewable diesel, has to go through another process, which is more expensive, and it's another opportunity to add value to the soybeans and the corn, and you talk about sustainable aviation fuel, which that is something else that's coming down the pipeline in the future. It's all positive for what we grow here in Illinois as soybean and corn farmers, but it yet to be realized. And the unfortunate thing that I see in all this is they're all dependent upon what happens in Washington, D.C., and that's very unpredictable. And so we hope that Treasury comes up with favorable regulations, but I'm skeptical that they will. That will benefit
uncertainty is a problem. We talked about that this morning, and it's a very big problem when you're trying to make a 5-year plan.
One of the things I might throw in there that is troublesome to the points that have just been made is that currently, if I'm not mistaken, David, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but the current administration and EPA are leaning towards a European model of energy counting or carbon intensity counting, if you will, whereas I think most people in the biofuels arena or corn or soybeans or whatever are proponents of using what's called the GREET model, GREET, and we've talked about it before here, but there's a gentleman, Dr. Michael Wang, who is kind of has developed the gold standard for that carbon intensity counting. He works out of a Department of Energy lab up in the Chicago suburbs, up not far, Burr Ridge or somewhere right off 55 there at Argonne National Lab. That he is the gold standard for being up to date, whereas some of these European models are way behind. We're using 1950s agriculture, those kind of things, which put us in a bad light. And as a result, what happens is our ethanol, if you will, or corn, they would say, you know what, it's not as sustainable as Brazilian because they use a different model, let's say. So you've got the worldwide folks, or even folks in California, that would rather buy Brazilian ethanol than they would U.S. because of those models that are so outdated. So we got some troublesome things ahead of us, really.
Yeah, we talked about California yesterday. 1% of hogs are grown, or there's 1% of pig farmers in California. However, with Proposition 12, the IPPA was here yesterday. They're making a decision with that ballot initiative that affects 49 states and their farmers. So that is. So I believe it when you say that California might buy Brazilian corn. Chris, what do you think from the banking perspective?
Well, I think Ron is throwing the bankers under the bus when he's talking about the Treasury, but can't trust the bankers. No, wow. I mean, I think it's just very, very interesting how much what's at play right now, what's at stake right now. There's so much at stake. You heard it at breakfast morning. You're hearing it right now. So it sounds like the next 6 months or year are going to be really, really critical. And certainly, the message was talking about, when you have all this uncertainty, what do? And that's a big problem. As bankers, we certainly like to develop plans that we can halfway count on. But so that's a big issue. And Jake, I appreciate your comment about only 5% of the crop being sold. So that's another very interesting thing. So one thing I want to squeeze in here, Vanessa, it kind of goes back to the last topic, but I'll squeeze it in. So we've been tracking, and I report on this in past roundtables. We've been tracking. We've got about 80 producers we track on corn and soybean production, and so globally on those 80 producers, the break even that we have on corn right now is $4.67 a bushel. That's 45,000 acres accounted for there, and with a yield projection of 213. So as we speak of today, that 467 would give a negative $28 net income per acre. On the soybean side, break even is 11.59 at 63 bushel, and that's a profit of $92 an acre. So the economics have changed a lot over this year, and when people didn't sell, right, and when people didn't take advantage of those prices early on in summer, that's had a huge impact on this model that we run. So, I think hopefully these markets will we'll get some energy in them and come back a little bit. But as we sit today, certainly it's not going to be the kind of year economically that we had last year.
Pat, your commentary on this subject?
Yeah, so I'm a banker too, but at breakfast this morning, the gentleman from the Corn Association was talking about demand deterioration through the legislation and ethanol. And my thought on that was, we all know that that's going to deteriorate the corn market hard. And going into that for the next 10 years or, whatever time frame that is, cash flows are tight already. So with that demand deterioration looming, coming down the pipe, the guys really got to focus on efficiencies and a 467 break even. I think back to last fall, we prepaid anhydrous probably 11 and a quarter. I know some guys prepaid some anhydrous this fall 5 and a quarter, 6 and a quarter. Yeah. So, and my estimation of that is there's some anhydrous economists in a back room somewhere that think the next 12 months is going to be pretty rough. Now, whether that, truth to that, I don't know. But somebody's forecast models are looking down the road saying we can't be charging, where's the spread at? So as far as my portfolio and my guys I work with, I'm predominantly livestock. I've got several grain operations, and I've been working with them talking about cost production and knowing your cost of production and figuring out where your inefficiencies are, because the lean, making hay last year while we could, you better have some of that saved back because the market will take some of it away from you in the next 3 years. So,
and the sustainable aviation fuel is it's making headlines in other industries, not just in the agriculture industry. I'm sure you're hearing a lot about it too, Delon.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Ron about that. Of how do we make sure that we can have production somewhat flow as the demand, as the demand for this grows, and we provide product so that we don't lose our chance or that we don't, get chosen, something else get chosen instead. How do you build that the way that the industry would want it to be built?
So my recollection is when sustainable aviation fuel first became a topic of discussion, many of the large soybean processing companies said, we're going to build a plant specifically to process soybean oil into sustainable aviation fuel. Most of those plants weren't going to come online until 2026, from what I've been hearing and reading. So when you have 83 million acres of soybeans this year, there isn't that big pull right now for increased soybean production here in the United States. I think it will come, but it's going to come because the market is working the way markets should. There's demand, people will build processing plants. What I am worried about is that if you have government policies that artificially create demand that isn't there yet, then we're going to fall short of producing enough soybeans to meet the demand. I think once you get the airline industry convinced that they can lower their carbon score by using sustainable aviation fuel, I think your demand will come. But it's got to come naturally instead of artificially, in my opinion.
What do we have? 2 airlines, David, so far in the last year have committed to the future of using sustainable aviation fuel?
Yeah, some have committed with actual dollars, and others have committed verbally. But this is an interesting topic in that we mentioned the potential demand destruction on corn, by ethanol losing market share in on-road fuels. So SAF, the grand challenge that has been put forth by this administration is 3 billion gallons by 2030, and then 30 to 35 billion gallons by 2050. It's a huge market. It's more than ethanol or soybean oil or cellulosic can supply all on its own. But Ron's correct. I mean, the policies here are going to be critical. Rob mentions the GREET model. If the GREET model is not utilized in this bill, corn ethanol will be excluded. We will not be able to be a participant in it, and that's the push-pull that's going on right now. You've got a European-style attitude that says we don't want food crops, which corn's not a food crop in my mind. That say we don't want food crops to be a part of this, essentially. Well, we've been down this cellulosic road before with ethanol, and it's a rabbit hole. And our messaging has been, if you want this done and you want it done right, then allow the bioprocessing industry to participate and give us tools to participate, and we'll get you a big portion of that. But if you're going to put barriers up based on political ideology, then it's probably not going to happen.
Well, and I agree. I mean, that's like saying the beef industry. McDonald's says, "Hey, we're going to sell 3 billion more burgers. Please, by all means, cattle producers, let's go." Do you ever feel, you've been with Big River quite a while and doing these ag roundtables, it seems like ethanol or biofuels, it seems like it's a one-legged duck swimming in a circle because you're always there to provide the product, the policy sometimes leave you out.
Well, and allow me to get on my soapbox for just a minute, but I mean, this industry at 20 years old has been adding value to the agriculture communities for 20 years. You've got a carbon economy that is developing. It's coming, it's developing. Our customers want it, whether they're international customers or even local customers. They want low carbon fuel. The carbon portion of that these farmers collect every fall has value now. Allow the ethanol industry and the bioprocessing industry to collect that value and distribute it just like we've done for the last 20 years, and it will be done correctly, and it will be a boon to Midwest agriculture.
Well, as he mentioned earlier, the ideology of some of the political nature of what we're going through, and Chris talked about businesses operate on certainty. So without certainty, people don't invest massive amounts of money to support what could or may not, transpire and come into fruition. So the other piece of it is, I mean, there's a big challenge out to the ag industry. Right now they're asking, well, can you raise enough in sustainable aviation fuel or renewable diesel or those kind of things? They could wind up being our savior in this whole electric debacle that we're currently being shoved into, whether we like it or not. And what's called the National Highway Transportation Safety Board ruling that just came off the heels of what they call the tailpipe rule from EPA. We're getting shoved down that rabbit hole that he talked about. So how do we avoid the train wrecks that some would like to put us up against? So.
Representative Dan Swanson?
And I want to key off there, as you mentioned, the 2032 forest auto that we talked about earlier, and 67% of those sales must be electric vehicles, and 47% of those must be pickup trucks. Electric trucks. I like to think of a secure nation where we're relying on American products, American ingenuity. We start talking about electrical vehicles, we start talking about an infrastructure that can be fractured quite quickly, where we don't have the ability to provide the energy to those 67% of our vehicles sitting in our driveways. And by the way, where are the products coming for the batteries in those vehicles? We're going to rely on countries that we're not friendly to. And we're going to say, hey, sell us some more of your stuff. Well, I'll sell you more of your stuff, but you're going to pay for it. And, so we're really not looking out for the consumer as a nation, in my opinion, when we start relying so much on foreign nations as we move towards electric vehicles. And 2032, just think that's less than 10 years away. Less than 10 years away. Where were we at 9 years ago today? In 9 years, we're going to be in a position where we're all going to be driving electric vehicles. I don't know how many households have 100 amp plus services to be able to plug in 2 cars per home. So it's scary when we have the EPA and the National Highway Safety Transportation Administration directing and demanding without talking to consumers of what we're going to be doing. So,
Senator Anderson, your thoughts? And any message out of Springfield? Because he's right, we don't have much time for the electric vehicle implementation.
Yeah, and I think to Representative Swanson's point, the grid is the bigger issue. We can say that the government's going to mandate all these things, but when we mandate that and we don't have a way to charge them, especially when we are shutting down nuclear plants, make them harder to stay open, shutting down coal, peaker plants around the state, and relying more and more on wind and solar, it's not going to work. And Vanessa, I think you said best. I mean, government is a one-legged duck swimming in a circle. And unfortunately, we're in a position where that one-legged duck is making policy, and it's going to be bad news. We need to let consumers pick what they're going to do and let the market drive itself that way. Because when we have government picking winners and losers and saying you have to do this or you have to do that, it's only going to increase prices. And then you get into a position where then government is trying to solve a problem that government created, i.e. The Inflation Reduction Act. So, we just need to get back to where we're letting consumers pick what works for them.
Vanessa, this may be before Senator Anderson's time, but if you recall back when, I don't know, it's been 3 or 4 years ago, I said paint the mental picture of, in the residential areas of Chicago where there are no garages and people are fighting for a parking place bumper to bumper out on the street. So imagine the maze of extension cords that are just running everywhere. You won't even be able to walk down the sidewalk. So, there are unintended consequences for everything we do, and that maze of extension cords might be problematic.
Yeah, Senator Chapin Rose.
I'm saying that in jest, but
of course.
But I've seen what you're talking about, the bumper to bumper, and it's true.
Yeah, Senator Chapin Rose and myself this last year, we did a bill called the You First bill, and it would mandate that every rooftop in Chicago would have to have a solar panel on it before they came to downstate Illinois.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
How far did that go?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's interesting this morning to talk about what Toyota's position was, and that we could get there a lot faster if we did, electric hybrid vehicles. It had a much larger impact. And I think we've been talking about that here at this roundtable for a couple of years, and it just seems it's common sense, and it's just like, it's really frustrating that we can't get there. Everybody can't get their heads wrapped around that, and it's just like, if you had true business people that were able to sit down together and give advice to the politicians and they would take it, we could solve a lot of these problems pretty fast. But that's probably not going to happen.
Did you see the CEO of Ford got in an F-150 and drove it just to see how it would go? At the first place he got, it took him 40 minutes and he wasn't charged 40%. He went to another one, there's one of these high charging places, and it was great, but there was one where, he saw firsthand, he's like, we can't make our people sit here for 40 minutes and not get more than 40% of their vehicle charged. So,
and wait till a line forms.
Right.
If you have 5 people in line, then what?
Just me driving here to Monmouth and back, I don't mind spending time in Monmouth, but I don't want to spend 45 minutes charging when, I can get in and out of there in 3 minutes.
It's okay. They'll put gaming machines in so people can play the machines, right?
Well, not only charging, but I don't know if you saw it 2 years ago. They took the new F-Ford 150 Lightning that's supposed to get 340-mile range, and they put a trailer on it, which everybody in this room, being in the agriculture industry, you're usually pulling something, right? They put a trailer on it, the average weighted trailer, and it got 26 miles. So things that government doesn't like to think about, when trying to implement stuff on people.
We have pastures 26 miles from the house. That's
The visual I like to use is the wintertime snows when cars are stranded alongside the road for hours because of an accident 20 miles ahead of them. They sit and sit and sit. It's with a gasoline car, it's okay. But when you have an electric car out on that highway, eventually the battery goes dead. You can't just walk up to it and jump that car with another battery. You've got to charge it up, and that can take hours and hours of cars lined up on a highway. But, go ahead. So, that's the visual I like to use of cars along a highway. You can't just dump 5 gallons of gas in them. Thus, Toyota would be a good plan, using a hybrid mixture. So, I'm sorry.
No, to that exact end of your statement, Mr. Halpin said it best this morning, polarization. And I think that, and this is just my opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody but me, but the polarization of the parties and the way people think turns into the polarization of the process and then the products. And what Chris said, the teamwork of a small gas engine as well as electricity makes perfect sense. You don't make a board of governors off of all like-minded people, because the melting pot is what makes a good average. So the polarization, as you said this morning, Mr. Halpin, it's causing us problems.
And
costing money.
Right. And like Senator Anderson said, let the consumer make the choice. It makes perfect sense to be in Chicago and have an electric vehicle or have a hybrid and switch to electricity, given what you're doing, where you're going. And it makes sense to tool around Monmouth. But to go to, family in Iowa or Arkansas or wherever, you're going to need to get there quicker. And go ahead, Thad, and then Senator Halpin, your thoughts, sir.
I just had this. I went to a seed corn meeting out at the Beck shed here just west of town last night, Paul Gavin's shed, and I was taught they had a drone. They were showing off the drones. One of them could lift 400 pounds and spray 50 acres in one run. But he said that's kind of the end of that generation of technology. He said they really think the next technology is a 3-cylinder 90cc gas engine alongside a single battery pack, and they would double the runtime, double the capacity, but it's the combination of the two that makes it better.
The hybrid.
Yeah, hybrid, yeah.
Yep.
But, my perspective is it's all about balance. I think there is a general consensus that we need to incorporate these new technologies, particularly among the younger generation, including the younger generation of farmers. But we can't be so locked into an ideology that we have to do everything all at once. And we need to make sure that we're trying to do this at a measured pace without disrupting the market. I'm certainly a supporter of electric vehicles. I know we have these difficult scenarios, but we've had electric vehicles on the road for a while now. We've had the existing charging network that we have in Illinois, and it's not a huge one, but we're not hearing daily news stories about how folks are getting stuck in traffic and having their batteries die. So I think we need to kind of focus down the middle to figure out what are the real concerns to the industry and how to address those specific problems when we're creating rules. And we need to make sure that every stakeholder is in the room and is being listened to when these agencies are making the rules.
That's interesting, because if the bird that died hitting the windmill would be covered in oil, then you'd have something happen. But when it just dies when it gets hit by a windmill, nothing happens. It's interesting how some of that works. But that's the one thing I was going to say too, and Chris, talking about need for planning. In the 1990s, only once did the U.S. plant more than 80 million acres of corn, and it was just barely more. Since 2010, every year it's been at least 88 million acres of corn. So if all these things require changes, then how will agriculture change as a result of that? Will Illinois change? Will North Dakota have to change? Will the Corn Belt have to have a different look? And farmers don't necessarily go continuous soybeans very much. They may do continuous corn, but they may not do continuous soybeans. So What does that mean for weed control? What does that mean for infrastructure? You know, that there could be some real ramifications here. Maybe not tomorrow, but
Sure.
certainly down the road.
I used the word strategic when I introduced Rodney Weinzer today, and I think that's the part that is lost track of, is a sound strategic move or thinking.
Representative Noreen Hammond, please give us your thoughts and how best do we take this to Springfield to find that ultimate balance or the right way to handle this that's good for Illinoisans?
So, Vanessa, as I listen to these conversations and we kind of dance all around it, I'm going to go back to the fact that, you know, we are here to listen and to learn, and what a great opportunity it is for us as legislators. Many of our colleagues in Springfield and certainly in Washington don't have the opportunity or don't avail themselves of the opportunity. So you have folks creating policy, and we see it in Springfield on a daily basis when we're there. We have folks creating policy that they read about it somewhere, they think it's a great idea. Oftentimes California does it, so it must be wonderful. And they really haven't researched it. They haven't talked to the experts, and I consider all of the folks in this room in the ag industry as experts. And so that therein lies the biggest problem. We're creating policy without the knowledge of what is the long-term effect, how long is it going to take, can we actually sustain it? And, you know, going back to, we have the same number of acreage in corn as we have for years and years and years. Well, we can't do all of this without change. And where does that change come from? That comes from, I think, an investment in R&D. And we have to do a better job of that as well.
And interestingly enough, we were able to have Congresswoman Sherry Bustos here a few years ago, and we were having the same discussion. And Rob and Ron and numerous other people in the room were able to point out the low octane. Remind me what it was. The next generation.
Low carbon, high octane.
Low carbon, high octane, which turned into part of the language that started the Next Generation Fuels Act. Where does that stand?
Right now, probably on hold.
Okay.
But it has been reintroduced in both the House and the Senate, and waiting for an opportunity probably to tag on to something that could give it fair notice. So right now, probably on the shelf, waiting for the right opportunity. But certainly, it could fix some of what we've been talking about here by getting us in a better place with ethanol inclusion levels, the ability to make sustainable aviation fuel work, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think the Next Generation Fuels Act is positioned perfectly where it's sitting right now. We've been talking a lot about CAFE standards, tailpipe standards this morning, and we're going to have a bigger debate on that before those rules are codified. And look, one quick aside on those is that the treatment of we talk about creating rules and polarization, but the treatment of electric vehicles in those tailpipe standards is really not honest. It's not a life cycle analysis of the emissions that are created from an electric vehicle. So they're given a little bit of a leg up. But back to the original point, we are going to have a broader debate about those standards and whether they can be effective or even implemented, which I don't believe they can. I mean, it's a default mandate for electric vehicles. We're going to push back on those hard, and at some point, some of the folks in this room are going to ask us, well, what's your plan? And that's when the Next Generation Fuels Act becomes critically important. We could say car manufacturers, oil refiners, ethanol producers, and a bevy of others are all supportive of this. And if you really want to decarbonize the transportation industry, this is the route that works. There are some good things about electrification, but ultimately, I don't think battery electric alone can stand on its own. So it's The act has been around. I think Sherry Bustos was the creator, one of the original creators. It's got some familiarity, and I think the timing could be right soon to interject it into the conversation.
Something not completely random, but I'm a random kind of guy. I got a friend who owns a golf course, and he said last year golf carts were $4,900, which is a little steep. But he's getting to the point, and sometimes those golf carts tend to disappear, wind up on a trailer, and go down somewhere. Next thing you know, you have 5 fewer than you used to have. So he's like, I need to buy some more carts. And
or get some cameras.
Yeah, exactly. So he called, and they said, well, this year they're $8,200. I mean, so we get the whole supply and demand, the inflation deal. But he also said nobody, because everyone wants the gas-powered carts, so there's a shortage, there's a higher demand for them. Nobody wants the electric ones. No one wants to have a facility. No one wants to have to put them under one spot. No one wants to build another thing and go through all that cost to do so and then pass it along to the customers and higher rates and higher rentals. It's one of those where it shows what the marketplace wants to do and the challenges then that can come from that. But it's the marketplace dictates this as opposed to something else or an ideology dictating it. It's remarkable how things can react as a result of that.
In our legislature in Springfield, I believe the Illinois Information Service had a release that new housing at some point, all new housing would have to contain, the ability to have electric chargers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what we passed was a requirement that there be conduit. I think the term is electrical ready, or not capable, but ready, meaning that you'd have to at least have the conduit out to an area where it would be serviceable for an electrician later on to come in and install the charging. So charging station and wiring is not required, but just conduit from the panel to wherever it needs to go.
And most of the new housing is happening in the suburbs?
I think that's probably true.
Because we struggle in our municipalities to get new housing, which we desperately need, but it tends to go up there.
I think that's probably true statewide, but I mean, we're seeing, we're trying to see some growth downstate as well. But I think the bulk of it is in the suburbs right now.
Okay. Sustainable aviation fuels. Anything else? First of all, I should ask this. How does it work? I've never thought about airplanes using ethanol. How much ethanol or biodiesel? What's the mix? What are we talking about? 10%, 15%? What's it look like?
100%. It's a drop-in.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, and I'm not a chemist, so, but whether it's alcohol to jet, or soybean oil, HEFAs to jet, it's, Fischer-Tropsch processes, and there's definitely some high-level chemistry that goes on, but the final chemistry of it is essentially the same as your Jet A or your kerosene.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anybody using it right now?
It's using that as a feedstock to get to kerosene.
Yeah, you use the alcohol and then you take it through, or the soybean oil, or the waste cooking oil, or the municipal solid waste, whatever your flavor is, and you convert it chemically into a fuel that's essentially the same.
And the cleaner burning air as a result is what happened, or cleaner burning fuel leads to cleaner air?
It leads to a lower carbon fuel.
Okay.
Is what essentially is the end goal.
The reason I ask is the American Lung Association pretty much supports Illinois corn, Illinois soybean with these concepts.
So cleaner burning fuel, however, in order to be eligible to be used that way, to his point earlier, some of these other things that lower the carbon intensity of that fuel on the front end before it ever gets used is part of the process, right? Go ahead.
Yes,
Am I
absolutely.
saying that correctly?
And that's the reason for all of this is a feedstock. Alcohol or ethanol is actually a feedstock in this situation to sustainable aviation fuel, much like corn is a feedstock to ethanol. But they want that low carbon feedstock, much like we ultimately are going to want low carbon corn as our feedstock.
Okay, for our non-ag listeners, and I want to be able to explain that to my brothers in the airline industry from an agricultural perspective, and I'm trying to explain how some of this works. So I just tell them to listen. Easy squeezy. All right, Dan, one last thing, Representative Dan Swanson. How do our oil friends, our colleagues in the oil industry, how do they feel about all this?
Well, remember, we're going to be, if we go to a truly non-fossil energy world, they're certainly trying to fight to strive on their own also. But I think they're being partners. As I read through some of the literature, they're trying to be partners. They're not forgotten too. They want to have a seat at the table. But I really can't speak for them much, but I think they've been partners all along on this adventure.
Okay. Right.
So in that vein, within the last 18 months, Chevron Oil purchased Renewable Energy Group, which is a biodiesel manufacturer. So it appears that Chevron, an oil producing company, sees the benefit of being involved in biofuels. And I think to me, that's just the start of a trend that will happen, continue to go that way.
Okay, good to know. All right, with us as well, before we take a break, is from our FFA, from United, we have Hannah Lair and Rachel Leary, and from Monmouth Roseville, Logan Corzat. They're going to ask questions toward the end of this program. We're very, very glad to have our FFA students here to learn as well. We'll take our break, our one and only break. It's a 10-minute break. It's 11:02. You're listening to the FS Ag Roundtable on WRAM, Monmouth, Illinois. And welcome back to the 2023 FS Fall Ag Roundtable as we prepare for harvest right here in West Central Illinois. DeLoss Yankee has our sponsors.
Thanks, Vanessa. And we certainly appreciate Growmark and all the partnerships that they've had over the years. So corporate sponsors is FS. Other sponsors include Midwest Bank, Big River Resources, Elliott Brothers Seed Company, Monmouth College, OSF Holy Family Healthcare, Warren Henderson Farm Bureau, Compeer Financial, A. Eugene Miller Agency, Hertz Ag Management, stations here, WMOI and WRAM, and the Patton Block Grill and Brew Pub in the historic building. You call it the square or the circle? Where are we? Are we in a square or a circle? Both, yeah. Right here in beautiful downtown Monmouth.
Hello, I'm Hannah Lair from United FFA. One question I have is, what advice do you have for high school students about agriculture?
Good question. Good luck. Production agriculture is tough, and without some lineage, it's a restrictive entry. However, it can be done. To Mr. Dan's points this morning from breakfast, ag is a huge career field. We need chemists, we need technology folks, just like those drones I was looking at last night. That's an ever-expanding field. So literally ag touches all sectors. So I looked at my college degree as it was a piece of paper that said I was trainable. So, and I wanted to go to college about as bad as I wanted to go to high school. So just know that whatever you go to college for, you can change and change career fields, and ag needs all of the good young people we can get.
Jake?
To echo off that point, bring value in whatever you do, get involved, whether that's learn how to drive truck or getting a trade as a welder or an electrician. Any day you cannot expect to just come back home and farm. You have to do something else. You have to put the time in. You have to essentially just kind of wait if you have that lineage. And if you don't, you essentially just have to have other income to support that farm hobby until it can grow enough to be its own thing. And even then, you still probably have to have that other income to supplement the down years you have. So whatever it is you want to do and try and get in agriculture, bring value to the table. Don't just expect people to pay you to show up and look pretty.
And Representative Dan Swanson.
Thank you. It's a great question, and I'm glad you're interested because, yeah, as I said at the breakfast, agriculture is such a vast field. When we think of agriculture, most of us in this room think of the guy out there planting the seed. Well, there's more than just that. As I talk to young people, I like to remind them, if you want to get into technology, go to your local dealership, go to your local John Deere dealership, go to your local Growmark. If you want to learn about technology also, go to local agricultural businesses, because everything we do in agriculture involves technology, whether it's planting the seed, spraying the seed, or harvesting the crop. It's all about technology. And being the number one agriculture, number one industry in Illinois, there's so many areas of biologists, as mentioned, chemists. We need chemists. We need biologists at our Growmark. We need them at our ethanol plants. There's all these different jobs in agriculture that's available. Veterinarian. We need animal veterinarians. We need small animal veterinarians. We need large animal veterinarians. They're getting far and fewer in between. So there's so many different career fields. When you say agriculture is a big word, but it's a bigger career field than any other business, in my mind, when we think about what's available. So encourage people to get involved in agriculture. Great to see your FFA, because FFA is a great stepping stone to what's available in the agricultural arena, because you've already recognized yourself as being a part of agriculture by wearing that jacket.
Don't be scared of change and hard work. My degree is in how to feed cows, and I'm a banker. And any math teacher I ever had would laugh if they knew I was a banker. So, change and hard work.
I would just say, show up on time, and be ready to stay until the work's done at the end of the day.
With expanding and growing corn crops, technology, having to feed our growing population, is there any sort of plan for the conservation of what's left of our wildlife and what's left of our prairie?
Well, I used to be on the Soil and Water District Board, and I know there's a lot of governmental concern. I think Ron is still. Conservation is a big portion of a lot of people's minds, and I think through this carbon pipeline that we've been talking a little bit about now, there's going to be more incentives for cover crops, which are a great conservation tool. I think from a wildlife standpoint, when I think of Warren County, I think about all the ground that can be put into corn has already been put in corn. So the timber that's here is here. And by the deer strikes that the Warren County Sheriff talks about, we got plenty of deer running around. So, but in all no jest, conservation is a big portion of what we need to focus on, because the soil is what our country is run by. And if we deplete those soil and precious resource, we're all in trouble. So what we need is good conservationists and ecologists and soil scientists to make us better at managing our organic matter, not only managing it, but increasing it. 1% of organic matter equals 1 acre-inch of water holding capacity. As we get drier and drier in climate, I'm not saying climate change, I'm saying cyclical pattern, holding water becomes more important. So study those things, figure out how to make the soil better, and we need you to do that.
I think as we look at taking hundreds of acres out of ag production every year as we build large solar farms, we need to consider making them a conservation growing area to expand the opportunities for our wildlife to live within those solar panels. I know we've had some discussion about pasturing sheep or pasturing goats out there. Cattle tend to rub on things that may not work so well. But I think as we look at growing conservation areas, unfortunately we're taking ag production ground out, but if we can trade that for some conservation areas within those solar farms, I think that can be a better way to use that highly productive soil in that respect.
And Ron?
So I think there's a great opportunity to have more conservation, wildlife preservation, but it takes dollars. I've always said that there are more conservation needs out there in the countryside than we have contractors to do the work, or people at the Natural Resource Conservation Service, soil and water districts to help farmers, advise them on what they need to do to protect their natural resource. And so there's a great need out there, but it takes a lot of dollars to do that. And farmers are willing to spend the money themselves to do it, but there's just not enough people to assist with that. So the more people we have, whether it's in the offices at that farm service agency or the contractors doing the work, there's a great need out.
And I'll just add that developers, not just, they're a part of this too, because you drive around and you see empty buildings, huge parking lots. You look over, in parts of our local area, but the same stores are out where there was timber, on the edge of town by a highway. You know what I mean? So it's how do we figure out not to make more concrete from already existing timber? And so that's just another additional. Thank you both. Appreciate it. That is Rachel Leary and Hannah Lair. Thank you so much for coming over from United FFA. Okay, Rob, you had a question we want to share with our legislators, or a question to ask them.
Well, I might throw out to the legislative folks that are here that I think there is some discussion around, and I don't know if I have my terminology correct or not, but a Illinois clean fuels standard, if you will, or much like California has a fuel standard. I think there's some move afoot to look at developing something like that in Illinois.
Have either of the four of you heard of that yet?
I mean, I haven't. I might be the first to hear it out of the four of us if it's happening, but no one specifically approached me about it. I wouldn't be surprised if it was on an agenda somewhere, but I don't know that there's specific legislation for it. And if you guys have seen it.
David, you wanted to add something as well?
I think it's Senator Kohler bill with Illinois Corn Growers and Illinois Renewable Fuels Association. We have reviewed the bill. It looks very preliminary at this point, and if it were to be introduced today, which I don't think it would, there wouldn't be a lot of support, at least from those two groups, simply because it's a little vague, and technology neutral is something that we're looking for in that. And just to be blunt, if it's a Trojan horse for electric vehicles, you probably won't get a lot of ag support on it. And it needs some refinement for sure.
Okay.
But I would say along the heels of what he's talking about there, if we can be incorporated into the discussion to guide it in a positive direction for everybody and be business friendly and all those kind of things, we can move mountains, if we can get that kind of feedback input, be part of it before things tend to get shoved at us a little too hard without that input. So.
And while do you remember where you're seeing that discussion?
The congressman from Peoria, I believe. Taylor.
Okay.
And while we have the legislators here today, Brendan and I were on the roundtable yesterday, and the question was asked at the Illinois Pork Producers Association whether or not a Proposition 12 could be considered, or a ballot initiative could be considered like Proposition 12 in California here in Illinois, and the answer was it was possible, and that had discussion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brendan, it was just discussionary at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the ladies that were here yesterday talking about it said that they could feel that could very well happen in Illinois. It hasn't yet, but I know there's been grumblings of it, is what I thought they were alluding to.
So heads up on that one as well. Have you heard anything about it, Senator Halpin?
No, and we don't have the same system to allow the propositions to pass as a popular vote. Anything would have to come through legislatively, but I have not seen that legislation.
Okay, just a heads up. They're just hearing about it. But what their concern was yesterday was there's question 3 that's been introduced in another state. So their concern was, is this going to be state to state to state with their choices about how the pig farmers raise their pigs?
Yes, certainly would not want to see that here in Illinois, but I can tell you that within our livestock facilities we have on our farm, occasionally and recently we've been getting what are called open gestation pigs put in our buildings, and meaning they then go to a harvesting plant or processing plant different from most other pigs that we would have raised, and they're treated differently. They go to market in a specifically identified as open gestation pigs, which I suspect would be part of that Proposition 12, which means then they could be sold probably in the California meat market. But they are specifically identified as an open gestation pig. They get the same feed as every other pig that ever has gone through our building or will go through the building, but they go through a different, they're identified differently.
Okay. Anything from the cattle industry on any type of environmental policies like a Prop 12 that you're hearing about, or is everything pretty
No, I think, much like everyone else, no, I don't know of anything. I know the livestock Animal Facilities Act. Had some headwinds not too awful long ago, but I think it's fairly status quo now. We've had some good help in holding that steady. There's always a local control issue when it comes to permitting those facilities. That I think will continue to be a revolving door battle. We don't want state mandated control of permitting and siting those facilities. It's and the local control aspect can be a problem in and of itself. But as of right now, everything is fairly smooth sailing. I know Noreen is active in those things.
You're right that it is fairly calm at this point. But I think a lot of that goes back to how the industry has evolved from when we had so many of these discussions years ago, and practices were not what they are now, and facilities were not what they are now. And so I think that the folks, it's typical of agriculture. Agriculture are some of the best folks to police their industry, those involved in it, and they're the best conservationists. So I think that because of that, a lot of that discussion has been quieted.
Okay. I know our next couple topics, we're going to merge those together, and there's going to be quite a few people who have comments and commentary in ESG. DeLoss, Chris can handle that as well as others in the room. But take us through the carbon capture and sequestration pipeline, ESG carbon market discussion.
I tell you, carbon capture, pipelines, property rights, and where all this goes. I mean, there seems to be, is this the new solar? There seem to be a lot of people that are interested in developing pipeline. I think there's a recent case that was stayed in Illinois, in fact, related to a pipeline. So this is one of these things that's going to go for years, I would think. Rob,
emotional issue, and emotion drives a lot of reaction and thought process and decision making sometimes. But I think this whole carbon sequestration thing has so many positives that go with it. And I've had the opportunity to sit in with the Navigator and Wolf, both those pipeline outfits. And I tell you, when you listen and hear the lengths that they're planning to go to get it right, and to have safety top of mind and all those kind of things, you get a bit of a whole lot better feeling about it. So I know there's some folks out there really emotional about it, but I think at the same time it's kind of critical for us as an industry to be able to, as we just talked about, lower that carbon intensity if we're going to be part of some of these markets. And that sustainable aviation fuel may not happen without the sequestration aspect. And one of the things that's easy to forget is ADM's been doing it at Decatur for 10 or 12 years. And so we've all got, many of us have got pipelines going across our farm. If we didn't think about it, we'd never even know it. So I think if you can remove the emotion and look at it logically, and I think the big part of it's the eminent domain aspect. And I think we all respect, if it's done well and respect property rights, I think we can all deal with that. So
we're talking about these things. I mean, this isn't something that necessarily just runs parallel to the road,
right,
in a ditch. I mean, this is going in a straight line somewhere, so it's going to have to go through fields and pastures and wherever else.
Even to the point, if you just spend $1,000 an acre and pattern tile the field for drainage, and the thought of an excavator going from one corner to the other is kind of an emotional thing. But even to the point, I can't remember which one of the companies said, we'll put huge mains going parallel to the pipeline if we have to, and we'll redo your tile structure for you. We'll make it work, basically, in essence. So again, gave you a real pause that this thing might be okay.
Thinking of solar, for example, or something else that went on the farm. I remember when this was becoming a big topic a few years ago, and one of the things that the Farm Bureau talked about was, make sure you know who you're doing business with. Because, okay, I agree to do something with solar farm, and then 3 years later, when there's a question, that solar farm is out of business, long gone. Who are you doing business with? So you think that's a lot of it, of just know who your partners are and how this is going to work out.
Yeah, and I get every sense that they're attempting to treat these folks fairly where they cross their property. So yeah, I mean, you're talking about reputable companies that are dealing with government regulation and following ICC. Or I'm not a legal guy; I don't know the rules, but yeah.
Did that come up a lot in Springfield? Are these legislative, or is this more in the bureaucracy when it comes to
this is the first I'm hearing about it. No, I'm just kidding. No, this has been a topic of discussion for quite a while in Springfield, and also we're getting a lot of calls about it from constituents. And there's so much going on with this, and there's so much that is going to happen and is going to change as we move forward, because there's just so many moving parts here. I've talked to Wolf, I've talked to Navigator, and as I've told them, my biggest thing is eminent domain. I've been very forward with them. I'm very forward with constituents. I think to Rob's point, I think this could be a good thing. It's not soup yet, but at the end of the day, the eminent domain is something that I'm not going to be part of. If there's eminent domain in this, I'm not going to be voting for it, no matter what it looks like. I don't care if it's a square foot of somebody's property or 100 acres. If that person does not want it there, I'm with them, because property rights is the foundation of our country. So that's outside of that. Like I said, there's so many moving parts to this, and there's so many things as far as policy that we just don't know yet because it's still being negotiated.
Go ahead, Senator Hellman.
Yeah, I would just say that until you see a system where the rights of the property owner are properly balanced with whatever the public interest is into running these things, where I don't think we're going to have something that can pass or can go through. I'm hugely distrustful of these companies for the reasons that you mentioned. That you start off dealing with one company, but after a year they've sold out, they've merged with another company that might be another state or two away, and you don't have any kind of redress if something happens on your property. And that's a huge concern for me. And I'm not completely opposed to the idea of eminent domain. There's any number of reasons why you might need to use that, but in this case, it hasn't been proven to me that this is absolutely what we need and how we need to go about it. So I'm just a little bit mistrustful of what some of these corporations are trying to do.
There's been 3 pieces of legislation that have gone through committees, each dealing with something just a little bit different. One of the pieces of legislation had to deal with so that core space where this is stored, who owns that space? And what one piece of legislation says that if you're the owner of the soil covering that, then you own that space below. Yes. Additionally, if it's neighboring farmers own it, they own the person who owns that space above the ground is the owner of that core space. That's one piece of legislation that it discusses that. Another piece of legislation has to deal with where can the state step in to get money from this? How can the state collect their tax and revenue from this piece of legislation? One of the parts of this legislation, House Bill 2202, is it creates a 6 cents per ton fee for carbon sequestered. Well, the state's going to collect some taxes. And then there's another 2 cents per ton application fee, which is a part of a certificate of project completion, which allows the transfer of the ownership and liability sequestered carbon to the state. So the state's going to capture some money there. And then the third piece of legislation is about the Federal Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Until the feds establish what those safety requirements are for the pipeline, the state of Illinois will not be a part of any sequestered lines. So those are the two pieces of legislation, or three pieces that have been through committees but have just kind of stalled at this point in time, because I think there's more discussion going on. And as some of my concerns, I met with Navigator, and I asked the person I met with Navigator, if you're laying a pipe and you come to an 80-acre farm and that farmer says no, are you going to go around? She said, no, we're going to use eminent domain. Well, that's a concern. And my last concern, and one of the questions I asked, is let's follow the money. You know, the people paying for these carbon credits are basically, why are they buying the carbon credits? They're buying them because they need those carbon credits to cover for what they're doing as far as they're expending pollutants.
And advertising that they will be net zero carbon by X date.
Right. By buying carbon.
As a advertising mechanism.
By exchanging those carbon prices. And so that was one of my questions to her, and I have not really got a response back, is so BlackRock is financing this whole project. They're collecting all the money from this project, but where do I, as a farmer or landowner, where do I benefit from the sale of that pipeline that's gone through my farm? So,
can I ask the bankers who is BlackRock?
BlackRock is probably the largest.
They're listening right now, so be careful.
Well, I want you guys to explain it, not me.
One of the largest investment firms in the world. They have their hands in about everything. All kinds of hedge funds, equity funds, you name it. They're in about everything.
Mr. Banker?
Chris is the expert on that.
Okay.
BlackRock's a big money.
Big money.
They're big money, and big money likes to make big money. And there's nothing wrong with being a capitalist, because I am one. But I think...
And board of directors from all over the world.
Yeah.
Some of the largest companies
very, very large companies
in the world.
So if they're involved, there's money to be made. That's probably an easy blanket statement to be said. As Thad's our private citizen, there's environmental questions, there's cash flow questions. As a banker, you know, if this can generate additional revenue for any of my customers in tough years of farming, just like solar or wind, those additional payments, I'm not opposed to that. However, as a private citizen, I have to think back to what's the core of why this is being built. And it's so that they can ask me to change my practices to create more carbon for them to continue and sustain the practices that they're already running. That's their business. That's their model. And I'm not, I don't want to say I'm opposed or for, or, you know, playing Switzerland here, but to me, that's a fact.
Well, historically, I think you look back to the days when we were fighting over hog buildings, and eventually Illinois came out with the Livestock Act, which really helped solve that issue. But I think you see this, how history can repeat itself, and I know that Warren County, for example, is entertaining wind farms right now. And I was in a meeting with the county a couple of weeks ago, and the firm was proposing wind farm up in the kind of northeast part of the county, and it was pretty. It's going to happen. I mean, I can't wait for that meeting. I think this is going to happen. Thad, you were at that same meeting, right? So, I mean, my impression was this is going to happen because we're far enough along down the road on wind farms now that it's just people are becoming more accepting that it's just going to happen. So then it becomes a question of how it happened and who you're partnering with. And the firm that was involved in that discussion, their money was coming from the Canadian government's pension fund, and so they're more of a buy and hold, not a buy and sell. So my impression of that was, well, if it's going to happen, they're probably a decent partner for the county to look at. If the county thinks they can stop it, more power to them. If that's what they want to do. But I think in Illinois, it's going to be hard to stop them if the landowners are willing to entertain it. And if the state has their setback requirements that trump the local requirements, then yeah, it's probably going to happen. So, and you could, carbon pipelines might be the same thing 5 years from now. It's probably going to take some time, but.
And I think, sorry, Vanessa, but in my mind, it's short run, long run game of the guys that built allow the wind turbines to be built on their farm. It is a cash flow positive event. I mean, it's a very good thing. They get to capitalize on that. The wind farms I know of to the south have been fairly good to deal with. I know several guys that have them on their farm. However, what's the long-term ramifications of that? Without the tax subsidies to make those things possible and get those projects rolling, is there even a cash flow positive event to that, or does the taxpayer just generally eat that over the next 50 years? In my opinion, that's what's happening. The short game is the farmer is getting paid well to have a turbine on their farm. The long game is it's all going to cost us more money in tax revenue. Now, I'm a capitalist. I don't blame the farmer for putting them on his farm. It's just, that's the way I look at it. So
we've got some people on deck here. So Ron, then on deck, Noreen, and then Mr. Zimmerman. So go ahead, Ron.
So back to the carbon sequestration, I think we might have getting two different issues confused here. After we had that discussion of the last roundtable, I wanted to know how many metric tons of carbon could be sequestered on each of these pipelines. So I did a Google search, which that's always suspect. But what I found out was that there's the three main carbon pipelines are being proposed would sequester 39 million metric tons of carbon every year. As a farmer, when I look at carbon sequestration numbers on my farm, that's $10 an acre if I put cover crops and meet all the requirements. As long as I keep doing it for however long the contract is, I don't have to pay it back. To me, that's a better use of our dollars. If we're really trying to sequester carbon, that's a better use of any activity that sequester 39 million metric tons instead of taking 39 million acres of cover crops, which we don't have enough seed to plant 39 million acres of cover crops. And so I think that's a better alternative than some of the other carbon sequestration activities. The other thing is about doing carbon sequestration on my farm, which I kind of started with the two different conversations here. I have a real problem with paying me to sequester carbon. ABC Company. So ABC Company can still pollute and still emit carbon out of their smokestacks or whatever process they use. And now you're starting to see some international folks talking about, predominantly in Africa, what I've been reading, is why are you coming to our country, our continent, to help you pollute more? You're going to sequester carbon in Africa, telling us how to do whatever, farm and raise their livestock, so you can, ABC Company can still pollute. And they're saying it's not, they're questioning the validity of that. And you're also starting to see some of the people, scientists that are talking about these carbon sequestration projects are not getting the carbon sequestered that they thought they were going to get. So the benefit of that is not as great as once touted. So they're not building a pipeline through my farm, and I might have an emotional response if they did. But, if we're really trying to sequester carbon and change our climate, then that's something that's better for, I think, better use of dollars and resources than paying me to $10 an acre.
It's almost like a shell game somewhat.
Well, somewhat, yeah.
Absolutely, you're right, Vanessa, a shell game. And what Ron is speaking to is the perfect example of local control. And he owns his property, he wants to do it the way it benefits his property. And that brings up the question again about eminent domain. And like Neil, that's a game breaker for me. People's property rights, that is their property. They have the right to decide how that property will and will not be used. And so, but I think the other thing we have to keep in mind is Illinois is not the only player in this. You know, there's many states that are involved, and so we can have this discussion within Illinois and say, oh, okay, everything's great, we're going to do this in Illinois, but what about the other states? You know, what about Iowa and others that are saying, no, I don't want any part of this. So I think this is a long game, and as Rob mentioned, there are some really good companies that are involved in this, and you know, ADM has been involved in it for years, and there is absolutely no issues whatsoever. And also, I think with technology changes, problems that have happened in the past, we may not see in the future, but we don't know. David?
Well, it's all good points and very interesting discussion here this morning. And just, you know, as a company that is signed with Navigator, you know, a lot of folks would probably say, why are you doing this as a company? You know, there's, you know, landowners that, and certainly, you know, we respect private property rights. But I think we have to understand, you know, whether they're unintended consequences or intentional, at the federal level, there has been basically an edict put down to our industry, and there's some others in the Inflation Reduction Act, decarbonize or die. Well, this is a 20-year industry, and we've got a track record of, you know, increasing corn prices, of energy security, of cleaning up the air. So we're willing to participate. We're not trying to make a political statement. We are just trying to make the best business decisions with everything that is involved, whether it be politics or chemistry or anything. And politics is a huge part of our business. The way this is setting up, you know, Noreen mentions local control, and we've got a serious disconnect here, and the polarization that's evident in D.C., you know, has trickled down to this level, and you've got one pulling and one pushing, and it's creating what we're seeing here today. But as an industry, and as someone who's responsible for 250 jobs and several hundred shareholders, I have to make the best decision for those people, and that is essentially what we are doing here. The price of corn, you know, and it's not hyperbole to say that if you take ethanol away as an effective demand source for corn, it will affect the price of corn. I mean, we're 35 to 40% of the demand. And if the federal politicians are saying you need to do this or whether on the vine, we're going to protect that corn and the price of that corn, and those are our drivers. That is our chief driver right now. Now, I think decarbonization, you can agree or disagree with it. I'm not here to make judgments on that, but like I said, what we are here to do is ensure that we keep doing what we've been doing for the ag community for 20 years.
Okay.
Is it easier, or is it more difficult? Does it matter operating in multiple states? Is this an issue that depends on which state you're in? I know.
Well, yeah, you're hit on a really important topic there, DeLoss. You could create a bifurcation in corn price. Now, recently, if you look at North Dakota and South Dakota, those utilities commissions have denied a couple of these permits. So South Dakota is home for several ethanol plants. If they do not have access to these tax credits, they're not going to be competitive. And their price is going to show it. Their bid is going to show it. It's same thing. If Illinois says no, Iowa says yes, or vice versa, you could create the potential unintended consequences here are huge.
I mean, we're talking between Galva and Burlington, basically. I mean, we're talking about what could be one or the other.
Now, for us to decarbonize, unfortunately, these pipelines are what we need to do it. So we get at the federal level, it says you need to do this, but then at the local level, you know, and are the tools available to do what is being demanded by the federal level? No, right now.
Okay.
So to Ron's point earlier, these pipelines, by this sequestration process, they can pull carbon away from our environment in such a huge way that he would have to, on his own farm, do that for 12 lifetimes to be able to sequester that amount of carbon. So it's a big quantity thing. But maybe even more importantly, and I'm still trying to figure all this out too. I mean, we're in a new world here a little bit, but rather than, let's say, the big corporation polluters buying credit, I think we're on the threshold to get to a point where corn is bought differently based on the product that they can produce as a result of that carbon intensity reduction. Not that Big River is doing it, but it, for instance, could allow them to sell into California, where today the door may be shut if they could have that.
Well, and a good example is, Brazil. We talked about Brazil earlier, and they're gonna out export the U.S. in corn, but the same dynamic is going on in ethanol. Now, 10% of our demand for U.S. ethanol is export. Brazil sold ethanol to our best customer, being Canada, for the first time this year. And why? Because they have a lower CI score.
Back to that certainty for business. That pipeline has a absolutely pure stream of CO2 going through it. So if we know that stream is going down there every minute of every day, somebody with the technology and the latitude financially will figure out, how do I pull that CO2 off and I turn that into something else more valuable? And that will happen, I think. I mean, it will, so.
Jake, anything you wanted to add? We haven't brought you in a little bit. I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. So I got two hats here on today, so we'll start the Farm Bureau one. Each December we redo our policy book, and they just released the new resolutions on what we're going to talk about in December. 18 and 26 for pipeline. So to say we're going to talk about a lot in Chicago is an understatement. Just what our policy is, what our stance is. It's very much at the heart of property rights, and can we do this safely? I personally agree with what we're talking about here. If we want corn ethanol to be a thing in the next 50 years, we're going to need to do this. I'm also interested, since Illinois, that kind of southeastern two-thirds of the state, has the prime geology for it. I mean, we are kind of the best state to be doing this in, just with the land mass. We're the biggest, so we've got to leverage you guys here. We've got to get this right, because it could be a huge boom for our state, or if we do it wrong, it could really hurt us, because we have such a large land mass that could affect. The other hat, with the grain elevator, you're talking about, wither off the vine. I'm just sitting here, I'm like, I sell to 5 ethanol plants for all my corn. And if they all just wither off the vine, where am I taking it? Because when the river market does outbid the ethanol plant, it's kind of a nightmare anyway. I can't imagine all of our bushels going that way. So what other markets will pop up? What other technologies will pop up? That'll all be an interesting theory, but I don't like that world, to be completely honest with you.
DeLoss, any update, or can anybody give us an update on the Mexico GMO decree?
Just a couple of weeks ago, USDA moved this along, going to a mediator, like this is going to have to be decided in the courts. But yeah, this is one of those that is a head scratcher. I mean, you just think about some of these places. I know you go down toward Macomb. They run trains. West Central FS or Western Grain Marketing, they run trains directly to Mexico, and then all the idea of that being shut off. I mean, that sort of thing could easily have implications on farmers here and all places in between. But it's one of those that, and how it fits with the U.S. Mexico Canada trade agreement. Is going to even do something like that. So it's one of those that sure will play its way out in the courts.
It's an ideological thing that the Mexican president and his wife have kind of cooked up and has got into their political realm, if you will. It doesn't really make sense. And when the folks in Mexico said, U.S. folks, save us from this, would you please? It tells you a little bit about the nonsense that's going on. And Canada has sided with the U.S. They're sitting on the side of the table at this panel for the USMCA, and it has no science behind it, so it'll all probably come out.
Okay.
It was one of those things when you saw it, it's like, really, we still doing this now?
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully it'll play out well.
And finally, Ron and Thad, food labeling, lab-grown meat, consumer perception. This has been a changing dynamic. There's changes in how food is labeled now. It's out there. It's in frozen pizza, manufactured meat. You need to really look for it. Thoughts on it? What are you going to do about it?
I'm going to eat out of my freezer. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I think food labeling, it all goes back to the almighty dollar. It's all about marketing and profits. And, there's some people out there that have a preference to eat that. And if they want to eat it, go for it. Let the market decide who wins and how, those things go. Lab-grown meat, in my opinion, if you put a label of lab-grown meat right next to a dog food label, and I've seen it, there's more ingredients in the lab-grown meat, and that's just facts. So quit putting it in the healthy food segment of the store. Yeah, I would agree. But again, people's choice. If somebody wants to eat that, they have the right to choose that. Personally, I'll eat out of my freezer. Consumer perception, I think recently I've been told or read some things where this lab-grown meat is building its own headwinds in consumer perception. I think the proof is in the pudding that people have found out it's not quite all it was cracked up to be. There's a few other things, to your open gestation, that's a marketing ability. That opens up markets, and, you see non-GMO on everything. They could put non-GMO on a rock and somebody would buy it, So it's marketing and it's money, and that's just how it works. From the beef standpoint itself, there's some things out there that change the market. Right now we're in all-time highs, but there's a storage method called suspended fresh, which is actually not reported in any inventories. So when the government reports come out and you see the inventories, frozen, cold storage, that suspended fresh is not reflected in that. So there's a few things from IBA and other states that are working on, and this is probably not to your food labeling stance, but it does coincide into package of the U.S. or product of the U.S. Any beef can come over here in any box, and as long as they open the box and close the box, it's now a product of the U.S. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. I don't want those people to have a restricted market that they can't sell here, because we need imports and exports just like anyone else. However, that beef wasn't grown here, and that's just not fair based on a technicality.
Ron, you've been pushing and prodding and poking about this for over a decade.
Yeah.
Seen this coming.
And so when I think the lab-grown meat first came out, it had an uptick in demand. People wanted to try it and see what it tasted like. But I think recently you're seeing that either level off or slightly drop. And so I think people are, whether it's because of the pandemic or whatever reason, they tried it and going back to beef, going back to pork. I think it's going to have its place in the market, but I don't anticipate it being one that's going to take a lot of market share away from traditional meat products.
Bring back Sam Elliott, right?
Yeah.
I'm Logan Corzat from the Monmouth Roseville FFA chapter, and I was wondering what the future holds for my generation of farming with electrical machinery, and then along with that, the solar panels out here west of Monmouth. When I get to farming, is there going to be much ground left to farm, or is it all going to be solar panels and wind energy?
Wow, thank you very much. Who would you like to answer that question? You've been sitting here the whole time. Why don't you pick someone?
We'll go with David or Rob.
It's like match game, huh? Richard Dawson, please.
Well, I can tell you the solar panel situation distresses me probably as much as it does you. I'm from Mercer County. That's where I live on the family farm there, and I understand capitalism as well, but I just do not see the logic in taking some of the most highly productive ground in the world out of production for solar panels. Now, at our facility in Galva, we actually looked at the solar panel route to generate some power, but unfortunately, it would take, I think it was close to 300 acres of solar panels to fuel that facility. And it's just not something that appeals to me personally. I get it on your roof or on unproductive ground, but on this highly productive ground, it seems a little off to me.
Electric. Anybody want to take that? Did you say 2050?
To your point on the electric equipment, if we can't have a pickup truck pull a trailer more than 26 miles, it's not going to drive your combine. And we don't have the infrastructure in the rural counties in rural America to feasibly charge a combine. And that's just the example I'm using because it's the biggest, largest, most need. It's not going to charge it efficiently in harvest when I need to run 45 days straight to keep going and get my product to market when I need to. So I someday, maybe, probably not in our lifetime, is what I'll say.
Maybe my potential future son-in-law, I think, he's worked for John Deere in the electrification side of things, electrical engineering background. But, I think Chad brought it up. I think the answer is going to be the hybrid. You're going to start to see some hybrid situations, I think, on some of the equipment. If it's happening with a drone, it could happen with, a tractor and a grain cart, So, I think it's coming in some fashion, but it may not be a fully electric tractor.
I think a lot of it goes back to the word strategic that we talked about earlier. And do we make decisions that are sound as opposed to just ideological kind of direction that we're kind of shoving down that path? I don't think any of us are against electric, but let's be sure we do it correctly.
Logan, we really appreciate you being here. I hope this was beneficial to you. Where are you going to go to school?
Probably Black
Okay.
Hawk.
Good for you. Good for you. And please stay for lunch, okay? All right. It is 12:05, Mr. DeLoss. We once again
Always fly.
right through it.
I wish we could take this back to when I was born in the 70s. What would we have talked about in the 70s, and what are we talking about now? It really is. I remember Carson had the oldest living farmer issue 2 lawn. If you remember that in the 80s, and that's what the biggest thing was that happened to his farm. He said electricity. And the crowd laughed and laughed. I'm like, that would have been the biggest moment. And that wasn't even 80 years ago. And just think of how this and innovation and technology and improvements, it brings more and more questions. But, it's one of those deals. If you have food, you have 100 things to talk about. If you don't have food, you have one thing to talk about. So, we're in the garden spot of the Midwest, and it is just fascinating to talk about all of the things we do. And one more thing, harvest is coming. If you're on the back roads or even on the main roads, watch your speed, put your phone down and pay attention and use your whole hand when you wave to farmers, because all they do is feed and clothe us and fuel us. So a little appreciation these next couple of months, and everybody be safe.
Okay, DeLoss Yankee, thank you. Keep up the good work with RFD Radio.
Good to see you again. Thank you.
Brendan Marshall with SS, your parting words, sir, and your farm safety that you'd like to share.
I say what DeLoss said. There's a lot of big equipment going to go up and down the road, and it's going to be going slow, so please pay attention. Also take time just to enjoy some of the things when you're out there harvesting. Don't get in a hurry. And also, I'd like to say thank you, Vanessa. We really enjoyed partnering with you, and look forward to next spring.
We'll do it again. Chris Gavin with us, Midwest Bank. Thank you for your partnership.
Thank you, Vanessa. You do such a great job, and we're so glad that you continue your efforts to provide this programming. And I'm just thankful too that you didn't make me talk about ESG. So thank you for that. I was going to pass it on to Senator Anderson to talk about, but anyway. So no, everybody be safe. Again, thanks to everybody that participates in this, and I hope we can continue it for years to come. Thank you.
Okay, Rob Elliott with Elliott Brothers Seed Company and Illinois Corn. Thank you for being here. Thank you for helping me with the topics. It's always a pleasure to get this ready, but Rob does a lot of the behind the scenes on nailing it down to what topics.
Well, thank you, Vanessa, for your support of ag and that advocacy aspect of everything. So I would just put out the same request I do a lot of times is, stand up for what we're all about. Every voice and vote counts. So,
okay. Ron Moore with us, also longtime member of our Ag Roundtable. I appreciate you being here with the American Soybean Association and on behalf of your local farm. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vanessa, and enjoy it again. I've learned some more things that every time we have a roundtable, and I'm glad to have the legislators here with us and hear their perspective of what they're working on in Springfield. So
yes. Also, David Zimmerman with us, Big River Resources. Thank you for your partnership.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa, and it's great to get with this group again. There are a lot of big things coming down the pike that, open conversations like this are going to be so critical in all of us reaching the end goals. And I think we all need to remember, I think everyone in this room, our best hope is for agriculture to continue to prosper. And I think that's, we just need to figure out as a group how to get there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jake Armstrong, our other partner as well with the Warren Henderson Farm Bureau.
Happy to do it. That's what we're here for, the Farm Bureau, to spread the good news of agriculture and just promote that positive message, just to be a resource for not only politicians and elected officials, but for the general consumer as well. And I just hope everyone has a safe and bountiful harvest.
Absolutely. And Thad Tharp with the Illinois Beef Association, local farmer as well. Thank you for being here again today.
Thanks for having me, Vanessa. It was a good forum, multiple opinions, and that's how you get somewhere.
Yes, we just enjoy the fact that we do get together 2 days in a row, plus the breakfast, and have our legislators, our elected officials, to be able to hear about ag as you embark upon different things that happen down in Springfield. So with that, I do want to give each of you a moment to, as you're getting ready to head back, I believe this fall, you've got veto session coming up. I do want to find out when you guys are done, and I'd like to have the four of you on a roundtable with some other folks, including municipalities like our mayors and our law enforcement, because there is a lot going on from that perspective as well, and we would benefit from a discussion like this because there's going to be a lot of questions after the veto session. So I'll start with you ladies first, Ms. Noreen Hammond.
Thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate it very much, and thanks to Prairie Communications for putting this on and all of your team, and Chris Gavin for your hospitality here at a beautiful facility. It's just been an incredible day again, and to everybody involved in production agriculture at all areas, I thank you for what you do and hope that everybody stays safe, and remember that you have families at home, so they'd like to see you too. But look, I would really look forward to that opportunity with the municipal folks and my colleagues. I think that would be extremely helpful, and more than willing to do that. So
yeah, I owe you guys anyway. You come to these all the time. It's about time we just do a flat-out legislative roundtable. So
be terrific.
Okay, Representative Dan Swanson.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you to everyone who put this together, and thank you to Thad. You were a great rose between these thorns. Thank you. Thank you. Veto session ends 9 November. On that, scheduled to end 9 November. But to cover what DeLoss and Brandon said, we're entering that harvest season very soon, and we hear of some neighbor having an accident, or we hear of somebody getting caught in a piece of machinery. I don't think there's any machinery today that we're faster than that we can get away from if we touch a shaft or a PTO or whatever the case may be. And equipment has no feelings, it has no consideration, so we have to be the ones that think ahead and plan ahead when we do work on the machinery, or for operating machinery, or for late at night. And I love to have my grandkids in the combine with me, but that also adds an additional danger. So when we have kids with us, keep in mind their safety too. So looking forward to a great, safe harvest season, and we'll talk later on.
And I think you have a dog that goes with you too.
Yeah, Tank likes to ride in the combine. Tank likes to ride in the tractors. Yeah, the biggest problem with Tank, he jumps up in the seat when I get out of it every time. He thinks he's going to run it. So
A farmer and his dog. Thank you very much. Senator Mike Halpin, I appreciate you coming back and joining us.
Yeah, thanks again for the invite, and thank you for everybody in this room for what you do for the industry, and thank you for the folks listening for everything you do for us. Please stay safe out there, and don't hesitate to contact my full-service constituent office, either in Galesburg or Rock Island. Happy to help with issues with state agencies or any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Neil Anderson?
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa and DeLoss. This has been fantastic, as it always is. Really appreciate the feedback. As Ron said, always learn something. But other than that, I echo what my colleagues have said. Have a safe harvest. Be safe out there. And as my dad always said, keep working hard so others don't have to. So.
Okay, thanks so much. We've always got a group here. Love it. Thanks to Caden Rogers and Adam Friedline from Clear Profits. They have provided us with the video today, and that'll be up on our radio station YouTube channel later on next week. Kaylee Foster, our ag assistant, will be editing that and getting that ready for us. You can hear Kaylee as well. We added her here in the last few months, increasing our ag programming during the noon hour and at all of our special events such as the Farm Progress Show. Also, thank you to Kelsey Crane, our longtime producer, Mike Weaver back at the station, our engineer. We appreciate everything that they have done for us today. Pat and Block Grill and Brew Pub just brought us our lunch, so we will go and partake in that. Everyone be safe. Let's have a really good harvest. Thank you to all. So long from the 2023 FS Ag Roundtable.